Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Candid show. This podcast is hosted by myself, Shriram and Krishna. So, in today's episode, we are going to discuss about addictions and various types of addictions, and also trying to go into detail about the cause of addiction. And also, at the near the end of the podcast, we would also suggest a few tips and tricks to kind of battle your addiction, even if you have something. Because I think getting it treated at the early stages is going to help us a lot. So, that is going to be the very brief overview of the content which we are going to talk about today. So, Krishna, what do you think are the different types of addictions which you currently face today?
So, speaking about different types of addiction, the basic types of addiction you see is the drug use. Accordingly, like the drug use, like drugs
Yeah.
and alcohol, and basically smoking, cigarettes. So, these are the first type of for main addictions we face in the society. So, drug use in drug use. So after drug use comes the technological addiction, so like device addiction and game addiction. So these are the second category of addictions accordingly of its effects. So like these are the two main types of addictions we are facing in the current generation. So now next types of addiction includes minor types of addictions include like medical addiction, so like addicted to medicines. So next to food addiction. So these are the types of addictions we face in our society. So first I would like to say about the drug use. That is the main and first type of addiction the society is facing. So like in drug addiction, if you see, if a man commits using drug for the first time, he doesn't know whether it feels good or bad for him, but he will give he will surely give it a second shot. So like that, in second try, third try, so like it keeps on multiplying. Times he uses the drugs keeps on multiplying upon a period of time after he consumes it regularly. So this is the major problem while coming to drugs. So
Yeah.
while smoking, it is the same as drugs and alcohols, which upon the first consumption doesn't make any big change, but makes you want to try it for several more times, which becomes later on addiction. So these are the main types of addiction that we are facing today. So Shiram, what do you like to share with us about the drug addiction that the society is currently facing?
So I think now we like to explore into the actual reason as to why, or the root cause of actually how addiction actually occurs. So the scientific reason would be that there is a part of our brain which is basically associated with producing a hormone called dopamine. So dopamine is basically the hormone which is basically involved around the reward center. So any kind of an activity which we do which kind of excites us or gives us pleasure basically secretes dopamine. So this is like the general idea of the dopamine hormone. So for example, if a person starts consuming drugs day one, for example, if he takes heroin the first day, and heroin is one of the most addictive drugs out of the all. So if he starts taking heroin for the very first day, what's going to happen? He's going to take it in, he's going to feel like extremely light. He's going to lose all of his senses. He's going to go into this enlightened state where he's going to lose sense of all his feelings. So that kind of a feeling, which is kind of a pleasure to him in a way, is kind of going to be stored in his brain, or going to be reinforced in his brain as a pleasurable activity. So the next day, when the same person again, when he tries to do it the second time, he cannot even resist himself, or even if he tries to stop, the brain is not going to allow him to stop, just because he had this dopamine production again and again just when he sees heroin. So in that way, you keep doing this activity over and over and over again for the repeated amount of time. So every single time the dopamine keeps producing. So this kind of reinforcement activity kind of leads to the initial kind of phases in addiction basically. So that's how people kind of get addicted to drugs. And this is not only applicable to drugs, this is kind of applicable to food, or even medical abuse basically, where you take excessive amount of medicine even though you don't have any kind of a condition. This basically kind of applies to any kind of an activity in your life which is kind of in which you're addicted to, or for example which you kind of do more than the actual stipulated time, or the required amount of time which you're supposed to do. So yeah, this is kind of like the basic fundamental idea, or the root cause of actually how addiction actually occurs.
Yeah, and basically they say that these people who are victims of such types of addictions feel like being in a very peaceful state of mind, where like for example they feel like being in heaven, and so like they have very great sense of state of mind in particular time where they used to consume the drugs and alcohols. So Shriram, I would like to ask you that whether the dopamine that you said is the biological reason for such type of addiction is the root cause. So like do you think these dopamine is are the reason for even for like smoking? So do you think there is a link by of the dopamine in smoking?
Yeah, well, I think the most primary factor or the driving factor behind addiction could be dopamine or is dopamine actually. But there are even like the secondary factors or these other factors which kind of don't come into consideration but are different for different people. So, for example, if you're in an environment where people constantly smoke around you or people kind of constantly consume alcohol, or if you kind of have this hazardous environment where you don't feel comfortable and you constantly kind of have this, you're forced to kind of live with the people who kind of have equally use drugs or alcohol. So in that case of an atmosphere, your brain kind of is forced to kind of adopt to their kind of strategies or their methods or their practices, just because you won't feel left out, because most of the time this is what happens is most of the people get peer pressured into doing something like this. And this is very common across this is like common for any kind of an addiction, for example even food addiction, because you basically try it for the first time. That's how addiction actually occurs. For the first time you try it, you get addicted to it, you keep constantly doing it. So environment is also one of the most driving or the secondary kind of factors which kind of leads. And also maybe because of the development or how the teens were especially grown, because if you kind of grow in a very stressful atmosphere where you're not happy with yourself, you're not happy with your family, or you're not feeling very comfortable in your domestic atmosphere, so you kind of start using drugs just to alleviate the pain or just to alleviate the discomfort which you kind of feel in your everyday life. So that is also one of the more reasons, kind of like the secondary reasons, I think, apart from the dopamine production which kind of causes addiction.
Yeah, this is the very inevitable part of our society that has become, that is
Yeah.
the addiction. So, like moving on to the next part type of addiction, we would like to say about the technological type of addiction, which is the main problem in the new generation. So, like
Yeah.
the technological addiction. So, other than the drug addiction, this is something that is very serious and something that can't be overcome. So like which is very inevitable. So the device use is over and cross this limit in the new generation. So like it is inevitable. So Shriram, what do you think about the device addiction in our new generation, where which is inevitable? So like they claim that it gives information and it gives you news. So like it is acting in the same opposite way, where it also spoils a person's future or a person's
Yeah.
state of mind. So what do you think about the technological type of addiction that we are facing?
Yeah. Yeah, Krishna, technological addiction is actually kind of becoming a very big thing in these for this past decade, I think, because we kind of are moving towards this more globalized and more technologically advanced country. So as we kind of keep on progressing, so amount of technology gets more and more integrated into our life. So because since we kind of like such live in close proximity with technology, I think you are inevitably kind of forced to be with technology 24/7. So that kind of reinforces your habit of constantly being around it and kind of getting addicted to it. But I think having a stable control or trying to control your addiction in this kind of situation is going to be definitely difficult, because wherever you go you kind of have technology. Even for your online classes you have to constantly face your laptop, computer, laptop, whatsoever. So I think in one way or the another you're still like kind of forced to kind of have a technological device or any kind of a technological aid in your life, I think. And we have kind of crossed the point where you have to be kind of dependent on technology for your everyday needs. And that is the sad state of reality that we live in. And especially children are becoming a very big kind of victims to this, especially because at the very young age they kind of get a incredible amount of exposure to technology, and this kind of leads to the addiction. Same the dopamine thing which I previously mentioned, the same thing happens in children also. And especially if this happens at the young age, that is even more bad, because things which you learn in your childhood generally carry on to your adult ages also. So I think children are the main victims of especially this technological addiction and device addictions.
Yeah, basically we can't completely blame the technology for such types of addiction, as like a coin, there is two faces for each and every point in life. So
Yeah.
if you take something that has equal and opposite side of it, so like if the devices which provides us both information, news, and also makes us lazy and not able to be very physically active. So these are the two main problems in technology, like device addiction, and another one is the health, which is the main thing which is affected. So like most of the after effects of such technological types of addiction, I think is the effect it has on humans eye. So like
Yeah,
basically, as you told already, a person who is generally addicted, which we don't term, which is a term which is not coined for the new generation, but it is an addiction, so they don't realize, and they
yeah,
have to sit in front of the systems for listening to online class or doing their online jobs. So people like going to work in like online basis. So these are the very big inevitable facts that we are
yeah,
facing. So like device addiction is the major problem that we are facing today. So this
yeah,
can't be overcome, but it can be controlled. It can be controlled. I am sure that it can be controlled. It can be made to come under control by following some precautions and following some rules. So like we should not overuse it after a certain point of time. We should have time limit. That is the main
yeah.
remedical method for overcoming such addictions. So like we spoke about the technological types of addiction, which gives you both information and which makes you lazy. So these are
Yeah.
the equal and opposite reactions of the addiction we are facing in technology. So Shiram, I would like to ask you about the main and major subtopic under technological types of addiction, that is the game addiction. So what do you think about the youngsters, mainly teenagers, getting addicted to games like PUBG, COD, Free Fire? So what do you think about such types of addiction?
So yeah, this gaming addiction kind of actually became a thing around. I think it was actually a very big trending topic actually since for the past 5 or 6 years. I think because we kind of got used to this gaming kind of a decade back. I think especially in India, since we weren't gaming much intensively, or generally used to game just for getting pleasure or just to actually deviate from a normal way of life or monotonous standard of life. That's how gaming originally came to be. But soon, the gaming companies or the CEOs of these gaming companies kind of recognize that this industry is actually much more bigger than they actually estimated it to be. So they kind of added these elements which they kind of got for inputs as inputs from the user, certain microtransactions like skins in these PUBG mobile gameplay, especially where they kind of tease you with the cosmetic kind of an appliance in the skin, where it is basically not going to yield you any kind of a benefit or any kind of an actual advantage in the actual game, but still you end up buying it just because it is appeasing to your eye, just because you want to have it. So those are the kind of minor changes which these gaming industries kind of have been bringing about for the past 10 years. So I think in that way PUBG has been definitely one of the biggest addictions. In fact, me and Krishna also have faced it about 3 or 4 months back.
Yeah.
Even we used to be crazily addicted to PUBG. We used to play day and night. We didn't have any control, and we ourselves were addicted to PUBG. And we have to admit that definitely for sure.
Yeah,
But
we definitely lost
uh,
track of time, and we were like playing like up to 3 a.m. in the morning. So that was very addictive. So speaking about the addictive nature of the game, so Shiram, don't you think other than the addiction and the mistakes made by the common people and teenagers, so don't you think the game's addictive nature is also a reason for such types of addiction?
yeah, but definitely, I think we cannot definitely blame the game for its addictive nature. I think because as a gaming industry or a person who actually belongs to the gaming industry, their primary motive is actually get more players to play their game. So I think that would be fair to say that the game is actually addictive. I think any kind of a game is addictive if you like it. So I think personally speaking, you have to have some kind of a control over anything you do, for example, and the same thing kind of applies here as well. So gaming is just another hurdle or any other addiction, just like drug addiction. But
But
even
if
though it is not severe.
yeah, but if the teenagers or the players or the people fall into the victim category of becoming a victim of such type of game addiction, then we can't blame them. So, like, what do you think about it, Shiram?
Well, I think the point is you say, Krishna, is definitely does make sense, but I think that is only a minority of people because, as we know, we kind of see
Yeah, it does. At the particular state of mind, if you are in the person's place or at the moment, you won't stop playing the games. So,
definitely.
like, there is no self control or time
Yep.
control. So, that person doesn't realize the importance or the after effects of such types of addiction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you kind of put myself, or can I kind of put myself in that person's shoe, even though like putting myself even in my shoes over the past 3 months, I think I would have also kind of not being able to give up the addiction, or not being kind of able to accept that fact. I think because you can't kind of living in this constant state of denial where you never want to actually accept that you actually have been addicted, because your ego is simply getting hurt, or you just are far too good, or you have a very high opinion yourself where you consider I'm not addicted to stuff like this, but subconsciously you are actually addicted. And it takes someone or one of your friends or even your family members to kind of point it out to you, so you that kind of brings it into your attention, I think. So in that way, I think we need to point out more, especially for the people who are addicted, I think, because constantly kind of keep telling them they're actually addicted is going to kind of help them, because they are actually going to have awareness, or they are going to step up and try to take control of their addiction. So I think you have to constantly keep reinforcing these constant threats of addiction, or keep constantly telling them they're actually addicted. I think in that way they might try to at least control, or they might actually be self-aware that they are actually addicted.
So yeah, like speaking about the game addiction, I would like to ask you that the most of the teenagers now in if you come under game addiction, most of them wish to equip themselves with like in PUBG. If you come equip like themselves with upgraded skins and the tactics played by the gaming organizations, so
Yeah.
they invest their hard earned money or their parents hard earned money in this. So this is a very big problem, I think. So
Yeah.
what do you think? What is your opinion on such types of useless investments in games? So yeah.
Well, I think there's going to be two types of investment in any kind of scenario. I think there's going to be positive and there's going to be negative investment. So, for example, as we can see, for example, we know a few of these very popular gamers from India. For example, Mortal. For the people who are familiar with PUBG, will know his name, because he was kind of this person who started off from nowhere. He was playing games for two people, three people watching, and now he's probably the most greatest streamer, or India's most top streamer. So, I think people who really have skill, or people who really have the passion, who really have the talent, could definitely do it as an investment, could kind of take it up as a job also, because I think esports is kind of taking up a very big thing in India, I think, right now, especially considering the forward mentality which Indians slowly are starting to bring up. I think esports is slowly seeping its way into the Indian economy as well, because as we know, esports is contributing significantly to the Indian economy. So I think in this way, if you are really good, if you really invest money, just because you could do it as a passion or do it as a career, you could definitely do it. But there are some of these people who kind of invest where they kind of basically just throw the money in the garbage, or just flush the money down the drain in that way, where that money is not going to contribute to anything, or they're just doing it just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah,
So I think
to
in that way it is just an utter waste of money, I think.
yeah, to point on the investment part of the game addiction, like recently we came to know that a boy from Uttar Pradesh spent 16 lakhs of his parents money by using their debit card on PUBG. So like
Yeah.
these investments must be like useless, though say, so they don't realize actually the victims of the addiction don't realize that they can't take even a single penny back. So they don't
Yeah.
realize the situation and the importance of money, to say precisely. So like the addiction is the main biggest problem that we are facing, that too the game addictions are useless, as it is just a game. As you see, these skins and these cosmetical types of these things are like the marketing strategy played by the gaming organizations and the companies. So we must understand their their trick and their plan to fool us. So we must
Yeah.
not get attracted to such types of plans they are planning. So like we must be very careful. So like in if you speak about the game addiction, it can be overcome by distracting ourselves in like we have to be distracting our mind always away from the devices, mostly devices. So if you keep yourself distracted away from the particular device, you won't get be the victim of the addiction. So you can take it under control, and you can
Yeah.
reduce playing the games, and you can actually for being real with you, you can actually read books. That is a very great source of information, and
Yeah.
it is a very great which is a very good hobby to follow. So the to avoid addiction, one can read books. It is very interesting. There are millions of books available in the internet. So like you
Yeah.
don't have to buy a book and read. So you would like feel like studying. So like it is a very wrong thing to do. You can use ebooks. So those are available easily in the internet if you go. So use your device in a very proper manner and in a very
Yeah.
positive way, where you won't end up becoming victim of such game addictions. So like you have to commit yourself into something to overcome such types of addiction. I am not saying this only for game addiction. It can be any type of addiction. You have to distract your mind away from such types of thoughts. So yeah, Shiram,
Yeah.
what would you like to say about this?
Yeah, I think the very most initial step which kind of like you can take to actually start taking control of your life or start to break off your addiction patterns is, I think, initially you have to kind of identify actually the source of the problem. So for example, if you're addicted to drugs, I think you have to kind of identify, it's kind of obvious, I think you have to identify the source of the, for example, where do you buy the drugs or how do you get the drugs. So for example, you have to eliminate the source, because that is the most primary thing which you can do, is just because if you eliminate the source, your brain is kind of not going to keep thinking about it, because if you have the addictive element which is right next to you, or even if you can get the element just like walk few downs during the stores and actually buy it, so I think that's not going to help you at all. So you have to somehow take out the source of the addiction. So for example, for people who overeat, for example, they have to clean their cupboards, or they have to get rid of the kind of foods which kind of do harm to them, for example, and just throw it away. So I think the most primary step in kind of taking control of your addiction is actually identifying the problem and stemming out the root of the cause, because I know it's going to be a difficult thing, because your brain is not going to get adjusted to it initially. You are going to relapse multiple amount of times. So the very first step, or the fundamental step which you can actually do, is kind of identify or kind of be self-aware that you are actually addicted, and remove the source or try to stay away from the source as much as possible.
Yeah, we have to distract ourselves and commit ourselves in something, as said earlier. So addictions can be overcome. It can surely be overcome by any person. So like who is even over addictive to such types of drugs or smoking or alcohol, he can distract himself away from it by following basic remedies. So like the best remedies, according to me, if you ask personally, I would say reading books or doing yoga. That is also a very big remedy of overcoming such addictions. So I think like if you do yoga for at least an hour or two a day, you will feel healthy. And those victims of and drugs and smoking and like alcohol use, basically the drug addictors, so they can overcome it by doing yoga, that is
Yeah.
physically distracting themselves into something that is very useful for their health and body. So that is yoga can be the best remedy for such types of victims. So and like reading books and doing yoga and taking a walk, so like going to gym, these can be the best remedies to entertain and equally entertain and distract yourself away from the distraction. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the more another scientific ways, or the actual medical way to actually combat this, is going to be cognitive behavioral therapy. So this is something which you've been doing for the past 5 or 6 years, where this is going to basically involve you sitting in front of a practified any kind of a practified doctor who's kind of has a good understanding of the human mind, or cognition, which basically is the fact that how do you feel, think. So that is what cognition basically stands for. So in this cognitive based therapy, the practice practitioner is going to basically kind of understand how your mind works, or how you kind of initially got addicted to it in the first place, and they're going to try to impose certain behavioral restrictions or certain behavioral changes which you can do over a long period of time, which will kind of impact have an impact on your short term goals as well. So for example, for a smoker who's been excessively smoking for the past 5 or 6 years, so the practitioner might recommend you to kind of reduce your amount of smoking per day. For example, if he smokes twice or thrice a day, so they are going to ask you to smoke around once a day. So basically slowly trying to cut off, but not still completely cut off, because that kind of a thing could be disastrous, because he's going to immediately relapse and his habit is going to become even more
But
bad.
don't you think?
So that is,
But don't you
yeah.
think most of the victims of such types of addiction won't come up and volunteer themselves to consult a doctor? Don't you
Yeah,
think
because
they would
yeah.
hesitate to do so?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is a very big problem initially, because people are kind of going to be scared, because they don't want to go to a doctor, especially for things like this. And I think that is the main problem with people, is that they don't recognize that addiction is actually a disease. It is actually kind of a chronic illness. If you see, according to the doctors, they actually say it is a chronic illness. So technically, it is actually an illness, and there is no shame, or it is not even bad to kind of go to a therapist to kind of talk about stuff like this. I think, because this can completely impact your life. This is basically like cancer. For example, cancer is going to kill you and have any very big side effects, but this is going to like completely ruin your life. It is going to ruin your happiness. So this is kind of equally risky as cancer. So I think people kind of need to have an awareness, or people need to somehow get it into their brains that this is actually a chronic illness, and the cure is, and you are not going to be able to get out of it in a short amount of time. And you should not have false hopes that you can actually change within months or two, because you have been if you are kind of a person who has been severely addicted, who has been addicted for a number of years, I think it is going to take a significant amount of time to break that cycle, because you have been so used to constantly building up that pattern every single day. So it is subconsciously inside your brain. So it is going to take definitely a lot amount of different kinds of practice, such as medical practices, even your lifestyle changes. So you have to kind of work very hard to kind of break this cycle of pattern. So yeah,
So,
that is
Shiram,
in brief. Yeah.
yeah. So, Shiram, to be completely open and practical and honest with you, I would like to list out another major addiction that the society is facing. Mainly, mainly the boys are facing that. The main addiction is that the masturbation. So do you
Yeah.
it is the main type of addiction in teenagers. So we should be more honest and more elaborate in this point.
Yeah.
And masturbation is also a very big problem that boys are facing, the teenage boys are facing. So what is your views on
Yeah,
this?
definitely. Yeah, Krishna. I think masturbation is. I think this has been. Like, I think this has always been there, but that this has actually become an issue for this past 3 or 4 years. I think, because before we didn't actually have a problem or addiction per se for masturbation, but I think the excessive amount of technology, or I think the way we Indians are especially brought up to be very constrictive or kind of narrow-minded, because even in schools we sit separately from girls, and boys are meant to be separated from each other. We sit in separate columns. So the schools are fundamentally, you are kind of fed that idea that girls, that it is like they treat girls as something kind of an object. So that is how you are kind of being raised from a very younger age. So that is kind of the primary driving factor as to why masturbation actually happens, or why masturbation actually get addicted to, because you don't know what it feels like, so you want to feel like it. So you do it once, you do it twice, you do it thrice. So it kind of continuously becomes a habit, and there is excessive triggering of dopamine, especially with masturbation. So you will never be able to, I think, officially stop unless and until you kind of understand where the root cause of the problem is, because there could be multiple root causes for masturbation. For example, you might go through a breakup, or you might have some kind of an heartbreak, so you might go for look for other ways to which to alleviate the pain. So you may go for masturbation, or you may kind of have this aversion towards girls, or you might have this shyness, so you may do this. So I think there is multiple reasons as to why the
Yeah,
masturbation
and one
addiction
of the
occurs.
main
And
reason I think is the social media, which keep on in which many pages keep on posting horny images to be open with you, and
yeah.
more glamorous images of women's and actors, and mainly the porn websites also influence such types of addictions.
Yeah, and this is why even the girls are kind of afraid, and they have a generally afraid type of mentality towards boys, because you can never predict what they'll do, because we are this totally unpredictable kind of creatures where especially some of these boys who are extremely creepy, they don't know how to behave with certain people. They kind of do these practices which kind of make the other person comfortable. So I think in that way the main driving reason or the cause actually why masturbation addiction is actually a thing, I think, is the way you are raised, or kind of how your mindset kind of changes, or kind of evolution goes through a change as you grow up, I think. So that is the kind of an idea behind masturbation as an addiction.
And what do you think can be the best remedy for such type of addiction?
So I think I don't have anything in mind as of now, but the only thing is I think you have to definitely talk to someone about this, because as you know, in any kind of an addiction, you cannot definitely combat it alone, because you are going to feel the sense of isolation. You are not going to be able to talk to anyone. It is going to be very difficult for you. I can totally understand that, but I think you have to seek help from someone, because you have to know that people love you, your family loves you, even your friends, for example. You don't even tell to your family, you could talk to your friend about it. You could I think the very first step, or the basic step anybody can do to actually control addiction or any kind of addiction, for example, could be to actually talk to someone, kind of tell, like, even if, like, sometimes when you talk about it aloud to some person, you kind of try to understand, oh, maybe this is the reason why I actually got addicted, or this is why I might have actually done this again and
Yeah,
again.
but
So I
the
think, yeah.
pleasure it, the but the pleasure it gives makes them blindfolded and do it with in a continuous regular and a regular interval of time. So
Yeah, but yeah,
yeah,
but
the
I
pleasure
think you're
also
not
plays a
telling.
very big
Yeah,
role. So yeah,
that is true, but Krishna, I think anything in moderation is good. As we previously, as you told initially at the start, if you do anything in moderation, is not going to affect it. The only problem with this is they don't know, kind of have a limit on how much to do it. So that is the root
yeah,
cause.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that is the main problem. They don't keep track of time, and they don't realize that this may affect in the future. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think, and also Krishna, to kind of give a more sensible kind of remedy against this, I think you have to keep yourself more and more busy, I think, because if you an idle mind's a devil's workshop, we all know this proverb.
yeah,
So whenever you are free, you are going to kind of think about stuff like this. Your brain is kind of going to deviate from the normal way of thinking. So try to keep yourself as much as busy. Do something. Maybe go out if you have that sensation or that feeling in your body. Just go outside, go for a run. Just do something kind of to break that pattern or break that thinking. Because once you break that pattern, so it is not going to constantly keep occurring in your brain, and probably in a year or two you're just going to completely become normal. You're just going to not feel that sensation anymore. Yeah.
yeah. We have to commit ourselves in something or the other to make our
Yeah,
mind
exactly.
distracted. Yeah, as you said, all the points were listed out, and this was a very great session, Siram. We have
Exactly. Yeah.
reached the end of the session today, guys. So I would like to thank each and everyone for listening this much, and please leave your comments in the comment section so that we know what to do, and we can develop ourselves in the upcoming podcast. So I want to thank you all, guys. Stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you all.